Economic Forum came out with skills that students are going to need between 2025 and 2030. Number one on that list is learning strategies. Number one on the list is not coding. It's not science. It's not math. Those things do appear on the list, but they're not number one. The number one thing is learning strategies, and the best way.
Hi, and welcome to Edwin Teacher Talk. I am Jody Denny. I am on the classroom success team with Edwin, and I'm an educator myself. We are very excited to be bringing you another Edwin Teacher Talk today because we do recognize that the best way for you to learn how to incorporate Edwin and ed tech into your classroom is by shining the light on you, the Edwin users, and giving you the opportunity to connect and inspire each other. Before I segue into today's topic, I'm just going to share a personal story. I have 3 kids. I have a daughter who's in grade 4 right now and a daughter who's in grade 3. And I also have a son who is 2 years old. And a couple of summers back when my son was born, I definitely wanted to make sure that they were engaged that summer. Parents, as you know, sometimes in that newborn phase, we tend to let everything else go to the sidelines a bit. So I wanted to make sure that my daughters were engaged and doing something active that summer. So I asked them, what activities or what projects do you want to take on? And I think there was some talk about maybe like creating a YouTube channel. They talked about planning a trip, but we weren't going anywhere with the newborn. And I think that they were talking about diving into surfing. And we live in Toronto, so I'm not sure where they were planning on doing that, but that was on the list. What they decided to do was to make and sell juice. So that sounded simple enough. I was on board. In my head, I sort of thought about, okay, they're going to have a little lemonade stand, how cute, outside the house, and I'll be inside tending to the baby, so this will be perfect. But I was for sure thinking inside the box and a lot smaller than they were. They definitely had a big vision. They wanted to take their juice project and turn it into a charitable venture. So that took them down the road of, searching causes and what was meaningful to them. And when they found a cause, which was the Canadian Brain Tumor Foundation, they wanted to find out, what do charities do with the monies and the donations that they're given? So that, send them down researching that. And this little project that I thought was a little lemonade stand snowballed into a 2-month passion project where they, learned how to do sponsorship letters on to local grocery stores to get raw materials and raw ingredients donated. They learned about advertising and social media, marketing, branding. They learned about customer service. They learned about nutritional benefits of their products. So definitely their interests and their passions led this project, and it became a very meaningful experience for them. And as an educator, what I have learned since that summer is that this is really the direction that I see education going in. And it's a very student-directed direction. And we call that project-based learning. Joining me on the call today is Dwayne Matthews, who is an education strategist and an expert in project-based learning. So Dwayne, thank you so much for coming on the call today. Would you please introduce yourself to everyone?
Hi, Jody. Thank you so much for having me. And that was a great story. It reminded me a lot of a story with my son and ice cream, and maybe we can get into that a little bit later. So remind me, ice cream and the drone. But my name is Dwayne Matthews. I'm a future of education strategist. I spend most of my days thinking about how to help parents, school boards, governments meet with fourth industrial revolution technology, think about the future of work, and start preparing students for that type of future. Personally, I started out as a teacher. I taught grades 3, 4, 5, 6, and a little bit of library. I taught at an inner city school here in Toronto, and I also taught at one of the top private schools in Lima, Peru. From there, I did a little bit of strategic planning under a superintendent by the name of Fred Wesson, actually Smith & Wesson fame, but his family sold the Wesson piece many, many years before. I left education and I went into technology scouting and technology transfer. I started a company in that, and the idea was to find any kind of innovation or technology that would essentially shift the paradigm. And during that work, what I realized that there was probably about 6 technologies converging all around the speed of computing power and computer storage, and that was going to usher in the digital transformation of work. and shift completely the paradigm of work and even economy as we know it today. And I realized that most schools around the planet were not preparing for that and didn't even have it on its radar. And so I spent a lot of my time helping schools get to understand that, helping parents get to understand that, and most importantly, helping students prepare themselves for doing that. So that's me in a nutshell.
Wow, that's a big nutshell. And I think that, schools definitely got thrusted into an environment of a digital learning and remote teaching environment that they quickly had to adapt to that digital age. Now, within this new education platform that we see right now, Dwayne, where do you think that student-led and student-centered learning experiences fit in, and how important is that to students' learning?
So I think it fits in most places. I mean, I think with the exception of maybe a little bit around math, I think for most other areas, it's extremely important. And what's important is really separating what's essential. What are the essential pieces? And essential pieces are pieces that I think that you need to actually get the project-based learning done, right? So learning how to read, learning how to communicate, whether it be in writing, whether it be in typing, whether it be in speaking and communicating, and then your basic mathematical skills. These are what I consider to be the essentials. And
right.
Then really thinking about, okay, how do I teach children how to learn? How do I teach them how to think using different mental frameworks? And to do that, the best way to do that is to actually have them deep dive into content that they're really interested in. Now, why is that important? Well, that's important because, okay, this week. So this week, Apple came out and they said, we're going to put 16 billion transistors on a single chip and put it into a device. And so that allows us to process a massive amount of information, which means that the amount of information that students are going to have to grapple with and deal with is going to be growing exponentially. So once upon a time, a teacher could hope to be the gatekeeper and holder of information, but that's impossible because the information is actually growing too fast. And so what it means is students have to really learn how to think, they have to learn how to be discerning, and they have to learn how to synthesize information to create outcomes. So the example that you gave of your children trying to figure out about charitable organizations and which cause, they actually have to learn how to discern that information, filter the information, and then synthesize the information to create an outcome that they want. And that's really where the success is. So learning how to learn and then taking that learning and turning it into an outcome.
Right. And I think that really prepares them for real world scenarios, right? So if they know how to learn and they know how to be critical thinkers, then they can really be put in any situation and thrive, right? It's not just like one specific category and they know that knowledge set, but it's now, how do I thrive in any situation?
And I completely agree. I mean, one of the challenges that we have is, we've done a really good job at teaching children one linear narrative, right? So it's one story. When the elephant in the room is that there are multiples of perspectives around all different kinds of stories. So much of the content that we deliver has a very linear perspective, and it does not necessarily have a multi-dimensional or multi-view perspective. The only way for us to be able to deal with that is to teach students how to think, not just critically, but to teach them how to learn. So if you look at Oxford University and the Martin School of Business came out with skills that students are going to need. The World Economic Forum came out with skills that students are going to need between 2025 and 2030. Number one on that list is learning strategies. Number one on the list is not coding. It's not science. It's not math. Those things do appear on the list, but they're not number one. The number one thing is learning strategies. And the best way to teach students learning strategies is to allow them to do a deep dive into content that they really find interesting, and then teaching them how to think as they navigate their way through that content.
So how does that fit into design thinking? So a design thinking framework. How do students, build those learning strategies and, pick up on the critical thinking and those different strategies that are really going to help them become lifelong learners.
Right. So design thinking is a mental framework that I love. Particularly, I use it religiously with my own son, even with myself as I think through any kinds of problems. Today, if I go and I do work with a company like Apple, or I do work with a company like Google, or I do work with the folks at Global DWS, when they navigate through a problem, they use design thinking. And one of the benefits of design thinking is to allow you to parse out and sift through massive amounts of information very quickly and get to a definition as to what you'd like to do. And it frees you from perfectionism. So it allows you to do what's called create a most viable product, and then to understand that there's an iteration around that. So, in school, once upon a time, to be a good student means that you got perfect. And, most students did a reasonably good job, probably up until about grade 3. And somewhere around long division, that perfection starts to go away and becomes really difficult. And you have to really kind of, grind through it. And it's very difficult and confusing for students because they still believe for me to be a good student, I need to get perfect all the time. But what we found is if you look at the students that are actually really successful, they have learned to absorb failure, and they've learned to absorb that failure in a process. Now, we talk about it all the time in schools, but at the end of the day, if you ask any student above grade 4, what's the most important thing, they'll know that the most important thing where they get the most positive feedback is a grade. And that grade needs to be a level 4 or an A. And how do you get that? Get that from being perfect. So it's very, very confusing. And what I like about design thinking is baked into the design thinking itself is this idea of imperfection. This idea of you're going to have something that you're going to start with. It's not going to be your best. It's not going to be very good, but it's going to start there. And you're going to learn to think about reflecting on the feedback, think about getting feedback, but you understand right away at the very beginning that the goal is not to put out something perfect on your first shot. The goal is to put out something, solicit feedback, and create this iteration. So I really love that about design thinking. When I work with people that design AI, for example, it starts off really messy. In my mind, I'm like, I wanted to do this, and they give me something. I'm like, that wasn't what it is. And they're like, well, this is iteration 1, and we have 9 iterations to go. And so they already know that baked in is a certain amount of imperfection, and they're continuously going to strive to get better. I think that's really important for us to teach that to children.
I do too. And I think that right now, because there's such a focus on social emotional support that I think students really need right now, I think taking the pressure off, like you need to get an A, you need to get 100%, and more on the process than the product. I think that is like a big way to ease stress and anxiety for students, like focus on the process, focus on the long road. It's not about the product. It's not about the mark. It's not about the grade, but the trying and the failing. And as you said, learning from that and growing from that.
Well, I think, and just to add, I think what it becomes is about the outcome, right? So the outcome on the process, not necessarily the grade. If you have a success criteria where you say, this is the outcome that I'd like to get to, but you know that there's a road to get there, I think that's fine. A lot of people, they struggle. They're like, well, that sounds kind of loosey-goosey, Dwayne, and it sounds very, kumbaya. And, does that mean that everybody's not going to do anything? And what if they want to become a surgeon? I don't want a surgeon going through a process. I want somebody that's a perfectionist. And I said, well, no, you're most right. Ford is not putting out a truck that is not going to be able to make it up the hill, but they don't start with the Ford F-150 being able to make it up the hill. It's an iterative process, and it gets better, consistently better over time. And so it's what is that most viable product? What's the basic fundamental pieces that are going to be decent? And then how do we add on that? But just getting kids accustomed to the fact that you're going to be adding on it all the time, and being able to know how you're learning and how to go through that process is much more valuable than memorizing a random fact in grade 3.
Absolutely, because you don't remember that, right? That's not going to sit with you.
75% is gone by the next day.
Absolutely. Dwayne, can you give us like an example of what that would look like? So give us an example maybe of like a project where what are the steps of design thinking? Maybe just a little bit of something that you've done with your son or in your classroom.
Sure. And so, okay, here's an example. So we had to do 2 projects. We're doing one right now, right? So let's go with the one we're doing right now. We're doing space. And so I said to a teacher online, I go, I'm willing to bet that I can do space just with everything online. And the teacher challenged me. She said, I don't think the resources exist. And I said, that's interesting. So my son and I, we went into the curriculum and we looked at what are the goals and what are the expectations, right? For space, 2 goals, 3 expectations. Okay, so the very first thing that we have to do is we have to take a design thinking framework and apply it. So what is the design thinking framework? The design thinking framework is a few steps. Step 1 is to empathize. So we have to understand what's there. We have to understand what does the client need? What does dad need, right? What does the board need? We have to understand what is it we have to learn. We have to understand what do the words mean. So we have to really understand what are these goals and what are the expectations all about. And so we spend some time doing that. Then we have to spend some time understanding the topic itself. So let's just find all the kinds of information that we can and start thinking, does this connect to anything? Does this remind me of anything? Is there any prior knowledge that I can connect to? And oh yeah, this reminds me of this. I remember I saw that Magic School Bus one time a long time ago. I'm aging myself, Magic School Bus. But
I got that reference.
You get the idea. I had a joke with my son with Magic School Bus last week, and I've been laughing about it all week. But if we have time, I'll talk to you after. But we get that experience. Then we go down to the define. So design thinking, first step is empathize. Second step is define. We get to define. What are we defining? Well, what is it that we want to do? How are we going to demonstrate what we learn? What is it that the client wants? What is it the teacher wants? What do I need to do to demonstrate my learning? And then we go down to the ideation. Okay, well, what ideas can we come up with to decide on what that is? I may have an idea. My son may have some completely different ideas. And then we get down to the prototyping, right? So once we get down to the prototyping, okay, let's try it. And that's where we create our MVP, which is called the most viable product. And now we look at it, we let it sit. We celebrate the MVP. Yay, we got the MVP done. And then we start thinking, okay, how do we take this to iteration 1? What is one thing that we can do? So I'll give you an example of that process. If I have my son write a 5-paragraph essay, I don't go through the whole essay trying to find everything to correct. So the MVP is there. That means the ideas are there. Some of them are mumble jumbled. They're all over the place, but it's down on paper. The first order of business may be, okay, let's look for capitals and periods. Let's just go through and do that. That's iteration number 2, right? It may be, you know what, maybe we need to go a little bit further on these details. That's iteration number 3, right? And so we go through that, but we spread that out. We don't try to get that done all at once, right? Because then it feels a bit heavy. So we take it, we let it sit, and then we come back to it, right? We set ourselves milestones. And once we go down, then we keep on having this iterative process all the time. So the steps: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and then test and iterate. And we go through that process all the time. So even when things are like, wow, we did a great job, we still put it to rest. We come back a couple months later. Hey, remember this thing that we did that we thought looked amazing? Is there anything else we could do to polish this up? Like, could we add something? Could we change something? Could we write this a different way? Could we present it a different way? Of course there is. There's always a way to make something better, but to get students accustomed to, this is the process. The process is continuously thinking about what's the function, how do we iterate on the form, and even sometimes we may realize we have to switch from the form to a new form because of that function. So, really start thinking about that. So back to the space example, we went into Edwin. We said, okay, what are the objects in Edwin? We went through those. Then we went into VR. And we went into VR and we found activities specifically based on what we wanted to do. Then we pulled in mind mapping software. And so from that mind mapping software, we've now orchestrated all of our technological needs to create this deeper understanding, but constantly needing, and going through. And now we've created a brilliant product or project that has all these different components and pieces.
Right. I like how you broke it down. I like that it's in steps and it's like a scaffolding of like the refinement, which I think is key to not overwhelm students. What big ideas or questions and topics have you found to work really well that still cover curriculum for project-based learning? So you mentioned there's maybe some, of the foundational skills that may not work, some math, but what, like in general, which like big ideas, curriculum that you can think of that works really well for project-based learning?
So, you can do it in a number of places, right? You can do a project where a lot of the times some projects are completely student-led and some projects are co-created. And so that co-creation could be, hey, I need these 4 things done. What would be your spin on this? Right? So I need a 5-paragraph essay, right? I need to get that done on my end. That's what I need. What's your spin on it? Well, the spin may be, I was thinking of this particular topic, which is a complete snooze fest for him. And so he may say, I would like to do my 5-paragraph essay on this. So I wanted to do one thing, and he said, flight's great. And what did we do on flight? Well, I had a really boring idea in my head, but he has a video game called Trailmakers, and he wanted to figure out how to get the plane to fly in Trailmakers. And so that's sort of how we merged this 5-paragraph essay together, looking at the 4 forces of flight and having to actually use it on his video game, which is in a whole other part of his life, and write the essay on that, right? So you can merge it in a number of different ways. I think what the challenge is a lot of educators, they get into the details of the curriculum, which is sort of the elephant in the room. We can't get through all of it. We can get through the big goal, right? The 1, 2, 3 goals and the expectations. But once we look at the goals and the expectations, we'll realize that there's a lot of flexibility in there, that we don't necessarily have to dive into the specific nitty-gritty. We don't necessarily have to, go through one layer of content. We can go through lots of layers of content once we focus on the process itself. Once you focus on the process, you will find that students are interested in lots of things that will cross over into the curriculum needs.
Yeah, and I think that you mentioned before, like, I think that as teachers, we like to be the gatekeeper of information and we like to control. And I know for me, it's even as a parent, it's hard to let go and let them explore. But you're right, like the curriculum will come as they dive and as they explore and as they get in there, they will cross over and meet those expectations. What about for teachers who, haven't heard of project-based learning, or maybe it's new to them? What suggestions and tips would you give them for, setting their students up for success? So, it's not as if we're saying, here, I want you to learn this on flight, now go and run and be free. We still have some parameters and a template for them to follow. So how would you suggest to set it up for them to make it a successful experience?
So the first thing that I would say to teachers is that they need to have a soul-searching moment. And here's what the soul-searching moment's about. We all go through life thinking about a story as to who we are. And so when we think of a teacher, we think of a teacher as the holder of knowledge, right? And so, that's the elephant in the room, because it's no longer true. Right? If a child has access to the internet, they're 24 hours away from always being a lot smarter than you on any given topic. And so teachers have to come to the recognition of that, right? They have to realize that in 24 hours, anything that I say, the student can go home, they can search it, and they can come back and say, remember that thing that you said, it's not actually true anymore. Right? And they have to be prepared for that. So I think then they have to come around and realize, okay, the very first thing is a learning strategy and learning. That's the most important skill. then I need to focus on that. If content is a commodity, meaning that a student can find any piece of content, inside of 2 hours, searching through, once they're, let's say, above grade 4, grade 5, they can find just about any piece of content that they would like to, and anybody teaching them how to do it somewhere on the web. Then they have to realize, okay, that's thing number 2. Thing number 3 then is to use the actual frameworks themselves. So to be very vulnerable and say to students, hey, guess what? I'm learning too, right? We're going through a design thinking process as well. And so you can start off that design thinking process and you'll be amazed as to, once kids know that, we're following this design thinking process, you'll be amazed at what they come up with. One of the things that I do with my son and with students in the past is to move away from, just having this addiction to content, right? I'll say, here's a topic and I'm just judging on questions. So what I want to know is the types of questions, and I'm going to use a cue chart to come up with questions. So anything that we're doing, I just want 16 to 20 questions, right? All up and down the cue chart, because I know that getting them down to, that last right-hand quadrant is going to be very difficult. I want them to do that all day. And, then we're going to discuss the questions. So now we're discussing the questions and they're like, oh, okay, a lot of stuff that I didn't think about. Right? I get a sense of, where's this person's head at? What are they thinking about? How comfortable are they with asking questions? What kind of questions are they asking? Are they being able? So now I can start to see where this project can go, because I have some insight. If you think about it, and I know people don't always like to use words like clients, but if your students are your clients and you're trying to understand the client, you have to do some market research. Right. And so to do market research, you have to ask questions, solicit questions, have people reflect on things that are important to them. It's no different. Right. It's no different. So you really have to balance, what are the essential things that I need to do? I need you to be reading. I need you to understand certain mathematical concepts. I need you to be able to communicate. The other stuff, is stuff that is important, but I have a lot more flexibility. And so I can bring you into that process with me, and we can understand that we're going through that process together. Once you do that, I think you'll find that the learning will become a lot richer for a lot of the other students, and very memorable. And that memorable nature of learning how to learn is what becomes really, really important. If I went into a room of 100 grown-ups and I said, here is a grade 6 math test from EQAO, right? I'm pretty certain maybe 30% of them will pass. And
Absolutely.
That says something.
Absolutely. Dwayne, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your perspective, your knowledge, and your experiences with us today around project-based learning. And thank you for joining us and listening in on this discussion. We hope that you feel inspired and connected. And if you have any questions that you would like to ask Dwayne or myself, Dwayne, where can people reach you and how can they find you?
So the place that I probably spend most of my time digitally is LinkedIn. So you can look me up, Dwayne Matthews, OCT, and add me there. If not, Instagram. I spend a bunch of time on Instagram, would probably be the next place. I think I don't actually go onto Facebook, but my Instagram and my Facebook are connected. And then I spend a little bit of time on Twitter, right? All Dwayne Matthews. I am Dwayne Matthews for Instagram. I am Dwayne Matthews for Twitter as well. But LinkedIn is probably the best place to go in and find me. I spend most of my time there and I react to people there the fastest.
Okay, and we will also post the link to all your handles below. If you can, please, and you're listening to this, please share with us what project-based learning ideas do you have to incorporate into your classroom this year? And we would love to know, so please comment below and we will continue the conversation. Thank you, Dwayne, so much for joining us.
Oh, one last thing. If anybody wants to join on to the projects that we're doing together, feel free to reach out to me and we can make that happen. And I'm happy to help people through the process. And, we'll start with the low-hanging fruit and move into more sophistication later on. But thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.